get started, please grab a seat. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Woo! Fantastic. Gonyea, how are you feeling? Work your way up here for just a minute then. All right. For those I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Doug Slocum. I go by Odie, and it is my honor to be the president of the Air and Space Forces Association of Michigan. Welcome to Business Over Breakfast. We'll give some highlights and everything here in just a little bit, but let's start off, as always. You know, we always work great with all of our partners, to include the Navy League. So our ambassador to the Navy League, our ambassador when you came in the door, Gonyea Jacobs, with our national anthem.
Thank you, Odie. And as always, I invite all of you to join me in singing our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. When the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
So one of the things we do is we have community partners. These are people who have memberships and support the Air and Space Forces Association. Mission Barbecue didn't apply. We did it on their behalf. So I would like to give a plaque to our newest community partner, Mission Barbecue, here to one more time, photo op. Yay! So this week they actually invited me to, I guess they have monthly team meetings or whatever on Zoom for Mission Barbecue. And Monday I was the guest speaker to talk a little bit about servant leadership. And I was a little surprised when they had 350 people on their Zoom call. But what a high energy, great group and everything else. So it's a wonderful company. No doubt why we do business with these folks. And if you haven't looked around on the walls, you'll find out their focus. But for my team, I'm not even going to try. Everybody on my executive committee and everything, stand up, raise your hand, pop up and everything at this point. These are the folks that help make things happen.
All right, so if you've never been to an air show, this one's going to be exceptional out here at Selfridge. We've been able to partner with our AFA Teachers of the Year. They're going to be there on Sunday. We're going to be there on Saturday and Friday as well. Friday's the Friends and Family Day. And we're going to be with them at the Steam Hangar.
Hangar 3 and 4.
Hangar 3 and 4. We're going to be in one of those hangars Friday and Saturday, and then with our teachers on Sunday. So it's going to be a wonderful event. We're going to be there. We're going to be handing out and building some airplanes with the kids. We're going to be talking to the moms and dads and trying to recruit to be part of this wonderful organization we have here. Talk about all the things that you guys do. But what we could use is some help to be out there to talk to everybody. So we've got some sign-ups. If you've got some time, you come to the air show anyway, stop by our booth, come hang out with us for a couple hours, talk about what you do and why you love the AFA. If you got time, hang out for a little bit longer. We got some morning times from 8 to noon, and then afternoon times from noon to 4. So if you got some time, come out and hang out with us. It's going to be a great time. Or sign up and help us talk to some parents and do some recruiting. Appreciate your help, guys.
Just one more thing. The sign-up booth will be right over here in this corner. If you get a chance and you can help us out, please sign up and stop over and see us over here in this corner. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks, Bubba. And they just graduated and commissioned. He is the ROTC Detachment Commander of the U of M, by the way, and they did their commissioning this last week. So it's great to see our newest leaders of the Air Force, and thanks for all that you do on both fronts. All right. I don't think I've seen John here today, have I? Geisler? Okay. But always partnering with MAMA, the Michigan Aerospace Manufacturers Association. Of course, we have the DC-3S table here with Mr. Lamparter, this guy over here. As always, thank you for your wonderful support, Ron and Mary. I don't see Mary around you. I know she's here. Okay, smart girl not sitting with him. And you had a chance to meet Janina already, who came up and did our national anthem. Greg, by the way, we normally have our guest speakers come up and do the national anthem, so she saved you today. All right, on our guest list, and somewhere I have a copy, I did. All of our elected officials, and somebody took my list. All right, so I am not even going to try. Elected officials, please raise your hands and everything else at this point, because I know I'm going to miss. But just look around the room of the wonderful folks that you've empowered to serve you. They're here being part of this too. So thank you all so much for being part of this organization and certainly of this meeting today. We already talked about my Michigan AFA folks on our team. All right, last time, I promise, I hate doing stuff like this. First time visitors though, if you're the first time with us, please raise your hand just so that people can say, welcome, glad to have you here. I hope you find this educationally, advocacy, supportive, I don't know, education, advocate, support, that's what we do. Our Air Museum out at Selfridge this next weekend is having a Veterans Appreciation Weekend, so just a little plug for them. So out at the Selfridge Air Museum, on base, this weekend, come out and join us. Our wonderful sponsors. We can't do anything that we do without our great sponsors, whether it's DC-3S always being a good partner, the Michigan Defense Coalition, I need to add one more logo down there on the bottom now. So we team with the other nonprofits to do a lot of things together, including what we call the quarterly Codell Breakfast, and that's coming up next week. It's our turn to do the emceeing and all for that event. But it's basically the nonprofits, AUSA, NDIA, WID, us, and now we've added the National Guard Association of Michigan. So all 5 organizations, we cooperate. We get along together, we host events together. It's absolutely wonderful. And then anywhere from our AEW to Brian and the Aero retirements. I know that we have Diana here with us, wonderful sponsors. Ray, I saw you're in here too, Belfour Properties. I didn't see Rick today, of Velocity, and our Velocity folks, and nobody from Sawyer. But once again, to our sponsors, we can't do what we do without you, so thank you so much for the wonderful support. You already heard me say this, education, advocacy, and support. These are the things that we do. The Air Force Association was founded by the very same people who founded the U.S. Air Force, those pioneers. They knew that they needed a voice in Congress and a voice to the community that you can't be while you're wearing the uniform. So the Air Force Association actually started a year and a half before the U.S. Air Force was founded in September of 1947. And the first Air Force magazine was published before we had an Air Force. So they knew, the pioneers understood what role we play and continue to this day. And 2 years ago we added, I still can't get it out smoothly, Air and Space Forces Association now for our U.S. Space Forces. Hey, we have a YouTube channel now, so you can see our wonderful people up here that are recording things. We take these, put them together on videos, put them up on the YouTube channel, so if you miss a presentation now, you can still see it. It's available on that YouTube. We do our virtual, we'll talk about some of the content there, but they're all available now, so you don't have to miss just if you're not here in person. So, looking forward, next week, KC-46. This is the next airplane coming into Selfridge. The big announcement that was talking about the next generation tanker. What does that mean? We're going to have 12 of these out here at Selfridge in the future. We're going to have Boeing, the people who build the plane, manage the program and everything, that are going to come in, well, they're going to come in virtually in this case, and talk to us about that plane, that program, and what it means for Selfridge. And then finishing up this month, the 110th wing that we had here at this location a couple months ago is going to be down in Ann Arbor talking about what they do in the 127th wing at Selfridge's sister wing, the 110th, over in Battle Creek. So they're going to come down talking about cyber command and control, and then the RPA operations, drones, if you want to call them that they do over at Battle Creek. Looking even further, towards the end of this month, we're going to be in a parade. If you want to join, it's always fun. We've got that very same truck finally cemented as what we're going to use, and big banners on the side, updated with the correct logo this year. And one of my favorite things about it is, instead of handing out candy to kids, these are dog bones. So I look for all the fur babies in the crowd and I give dog bones out. So if you want to hand out candy to kids, dog bones, be part of that. Join us, talk to any of our team. We can make sure that you're part of what we do in St. Clair Shores for that huge parade. And if you've never been part of that, especially in an election year, it's really interesting how all of a sudden it gets a lot busier during an election year. So the parade is going to have a lot of folks in it. But even further ahead, our next event, this is our last breakfast until the fall. I hate to tell you that, because we're switching to lunches. All right, so we're going on to our summer schedule. Our next one is going to be held at Starbase out at Selfridge. So stand by for information on that. That is STEM education focused on kids going into the 5th grade. A wonderful initiative that started out at Selfridge by a former astronaut. There's a space shuttle simulator, 3D printing, robotics, all sorts of cool stuff they do to get kids interested in STEM. There are more than 50 of these around the country now as a result. So this is called Starbase 1, the first, the best. All right, and we're going to go meet out there, see what they do, tour that place, and have a wonderful lunch from Mission Barbecue. Looking even forward on your schedule, our big picnic we do out at the Enlisted Heritage House is going to be in August this year. So we'll have our huge picnic and get the barbecues rolling and everything out there. It's always one of our best attended events. And then in September, at the Air Museum is where we're going to do our once-a-year airplanes, tanks, and tacos. So we'll set up a taco bar, we'll look at all the different airplanes and displays, and we'll bring the M4 Sherman tank out, and everybody can have a great time outside in September. Okay, so the latest trend. I always like to do my aerospace education part. So before we get to our guest speaker, we're going to continue with this idea of, so what happened on this day in history? So we're starting off today, May 10th. So what happened? We go way back in history. Now, those Selfridge Air National Guard Base, Selfridge, Thomas Selfridge, was the first fatality in an airplane ever. Okay, so he was flying in the Wright Flyer in 1908 when it crashed. That ultimately led to our base being named after Thomas Selfridge. 3 years later, we had another young lieutenant who was flying almost a similar plane to the Wright Flyer that crashed down in Texas in San Antonio. And if any of you have ever heard of Kelly Air Force Base, that's named after him. So Kelly, George Kelly, died on this date, 1911, in Texas, and ended up being another one of the longest continually operating military airfields in the country. So if you actually look between Kelly and Selfridge, the bases, the architecture is very similar and everything else, but just part of the history. The first bombing of a ship took place on May 10th. And it was done off the coast of Mexico, where they threw some dynamite out of a little airplane. But it was done by a Frenchman. Okay, so a mercenary from France flying in Mexico threw dynamite out of a plane towards a ship. The first aerial bombing of a ship. Go figure, May 10th. All right, back to World War II history, 1940, the first time that the Germans bombed England. That happened to be the exact same day that they also invaded what they called the Low Country, which ultimately led to the invasion of France and all started there. But it all happened on May 10th. So the first time that the Luftwaffe, bombed England, as well as the start of the invasion of what ultimately was the invasion of France, the second phase of World War II. All right, a really cool event. Now, I had to do a little research on this one because when I saw it, I had to throw the BS flag a little bit. World War II, Japan's theater, at one point, 1945, we had somebody flying an F-4U Corsair. All right, that's that gull-winged airplane that like Baba Black Sheep and everything that you've seen. Flying near Japan, spots a Japanese plane flying 38,000 feet. Now, if you know prop airplanes and everything, getting a prop airplane up to 38,000 feet is not easy. All right, the air is very thin up there. It's amazing that it could get there. But he chased them for 185 miles, which once again, that's probably about 40, 45 minutes. of chasing this airplane to try and get to it. And when he finally got up there and was going to shoot him down, the guns were all frozen. Guns didn't work. So instead, he pulled up, used his prop against the rudder of this Japanese airplane, until the airplane went out of control. Of course, it caused his airplane to get a little bit messed up as a result. He ended up coming back and crash landing. He lived through it. As a matter of fact, there he is after, going, that's what he did with his propeller. So I had to look at this and I said, okay, World War II airplanes, I wouldn't even think they have oxygen. Okay, so once you get above 18,000 feet, you have, a time of useful consciousness. 45,000 feet, no oxygen, you're gonna go to sleep. So I was thinking, do they really have oxygen on planes that operate around 10,000 feet normally as a ceiling if they go up to 38,000 feet? So I had to go find the old manual from an F-4U Corsair, and sure enough, it's got an oxygen tank and a diluter and everything back there. So that was a lesson to me in the whole thing, is they actually had oxygen systems in an F-4U Corsair that allowed him to get up that high after that long to be able to down another airplane using his own propeller on his airplane. World War II history, May 10th. Okay? Also, the first time Marvel Comics published The Incredible Hulk. What's that got to do with aerospace? Absolutely nothing. But I always throw one of those in there. All right, on May 10th, 1967, this lifting body airplane that kind of looks like an R2-D2, but we're going to call him M2F2. Okay? Normally it's slung under the wing of a big B-52 bomber, and out in California we would drop these things off and do some testing to see how they would fly. We were actually looking at making fighters with this lifting body design without wings, but it crashed. And as you can see, you read the last line there, when this particular one crashed, it actually became an inspiration for a novel and a TV series.
Oh.
All right? So if you look, this actually says B-52 right here. Okay, so like they're going to put this thing up under the wing, and there it is right there, the little plane that apparently crashed, which then we had to rebuild him. We could make him better than he was. Okay, for those of you old enough to know that show. The $6 Million Man. Aerospace history, there you go. 1972, the 10th of May 1972 was a very busy day in aerospace history. Linebacker 1. So we're later in the war in Vietnam, 1972, the Easter Offensive as it's called. So now it's past Tet, the Viet Cong are pretty much gone. The North Vietnamese Army has invaded the South, kind of formally invaded the South in what they call the Easter Offensive. As a result of that, we started this bombing campaign, this interdiction to try and keep that offensive from getting supplies and everything. So we started, it had been years since we'd bombed North Vietnam, we started into this operation called Linebacker 1. Just looking at overall numbers during this whole campaign called Linebacker 1, 134 of our airplanes were shot down or crashed as a result. We claimed 63 North Vietnamese aircraft that we shot down air to air. They claimed 49. Now, it's always interesting with the claims, but let's keep rolling with this story. On this same day that Linebacker 1 started, there was a Navy F-4 that took off an aircraft carrier, and they shot down 3 airplanes on this particular day. This is Cunningham and Driscoll. As a result, they'd already had 2 kills. They became aces. Here's the tough part. Their day wasn't over after they got their 3rd kill, because then they got shot down. All right, so as they got their 3 kills, they're aces, they're celebrating, bam, they get hit by a missile on their way back out. They crash into the Gulf of Tonkin. They get rescued and everything just fine. But it was the last time they flew, because of course once somebody makes ace, they don't want them in the theater anymore, they circle back out. And if you know the whole story with Cunningham, he actually ends up becoming a U.S. representative, who then gets convicted of corruption, then ended up in jail, but that's not really aerospace history now, is it? Okay, also on that same day, just to give you a framework of what we're talking about time-wise, the first flight of the YA-10 aircraft happened on that same day in 1972, when we had the F-4 guys become aces, when we had Linebacker 1 going in Vietnam. This is the era that the A-10 came to life. The YA-10 aircraft was then in a competition with the YA-9 to see who's going to be the next attack aircraft for the U.S. Air Force. What's missing from this picture? Anybody know right offhand? Don't have the gun yet. All right, so they're still developing it, so the initial prototype doesn't have a gun. So it's got a little different appearance to it and everything when it first took off. What's the other big one? Anybody know? That's called a pitot tube. All airplanes have them, all right? It changed how it is on the A-10 because we don't have that little thing sticking out now. There is a pitot tube, but it's much more subdued than the one sticking out front. So a lot of changes happened. It was a prototype that ultimately was selected. Now the YA-9 aircraft that lost, I can show you a picture of real quick. That's it in the upper left. And strangely enough, the Soviet designed Su-25 Frogfoot, which is one of their primary attack airplanes now. And see any similarities between them? It's almost like the stolen design. So the loser in the competition, the design was pretty much taken by the Soviets, copied, and then evolved into what is now their version of the A-10, the Su-25 Frogfoot. That's what the NATO calls it. All right, so enough of my yapping for today. Hopefully you got a little bit of framing of aerospace education for the day. We can check that off. But now our wonderful guest speaker that we've had Greg down at the 110th in Ann Arbor at our location down there. He came down and talked about his history. I'm going to let him dive into it a little bit, but a great history. Thank you for your service, retired Colonel, Squadron Commander in the F-117. But flew the airplane, has a wonderful background and everything. He's going to tell us a little bit about the plane, the program, and some cool flying stories. So without further ado, I shall hand the remote to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's almost the 80th anniversary, almost the 80th anniversary for D-Day. I bought this hat in Normandy. It's the Army Air Force, before the Air Force was even formed. But let me compare aircraft over time. In World War II, it took over 4,500 sorties for the B-17s to take out a bridge. I don't know how many they lost. I don't know how many men were killed. Vietnam took over 100 sorties in F-4s, F-105s, and Navy airplanes. In Desert Storm, it took one stealth, risking one pilot to take out 2 bridges. And none were lost. Just think about what that means in the power of warfare over time. Hope I can get this right. There it is, F-117 Stealth. Describing it a little bit, it's called an F-117. It is not. It is an A-117 in reality. It was originally designed to have multi-fighter features, guns and rocket, all that kind of stuff. But when they came to make it stealthy, they couldn't put it in because a radar is a reflector. All those other things are reflectors. So it was designed really for one thing. Air to mud, dropping bombs, anywhere, anytime, as long as it's at night. It was originally built for deniability. They wanted to build probably only 6 to 12 of them, bring them in, hit whatever they were going to hit, get out, and nobody would know they were there, and nobody could prove it. The nighttime picture, and when you start the program, you get in briefed, and I've got one to show this later, but they take you in. Tonopah is completely dark. They stand in front of the hangar, they open the door, they turn on the lights, and all the pilots said, what the hell do I want to fly that thing for? It'll never fly, it's too ugly. Very impressive, but we always told each other that they didn't keep it secret to protect the program. They kept it secret so the pilots didn't have to tell anybody what they flew. Yeah, high value targets, there it is. Twin engine, it uses 2 F-18 motors without afterburner. It's subsonic only. It cannot go supersonic because of its shape. Single seat, they never built a 2-seat trainer. The faceted designs, there are no rounded surface. This airplane was designed in the 70s with a slide rule. There is more technology in the little computer or on your desk than there is in that whole airplane. Your phone just is way outperformed that airplane, technology-wise. 2 weapons bays, 2,000-pound bombs was our weapon of choice. No threat detection or RWR of any sort. Completely, when we were flying, we were completely non-communicative, had no sensors.
RWR.
Radar warning system. You know, when they're shooting SAMs at you, the system goes off to tell you, hey, they're behind you. We had none of that. We were just sitting there. If you didn't know it and do it before you took off, it didn't happen. They produced 59 operational flight tests. Cost went up, obviously. In Desert Storm, we flew almost 1,300 sorties. No aircraft were lost or received battle damage. 1 aircraft was lost in Serbia. I talked to the pilot of that airplane last week. 1 airplane was damaged, but it wasn't because of the AAA or anything. He hit supersonic by accident trying to get out of Dodge, and one of the tails came off. It was 1 airplane in the fleet that had not been pinned. They're just doing a new modification. And when he didn't know it. He came back and landed. We asked him what happened. He goes, what do you mean what happened? We were missing the tail. He did not know it because of the fly-by-wire system. Stealthy. Okay, obviously it's shape and color. It's stealthy for infrared too, because the way I'll show you a picture, but the tail, instead of being round like your regular airplane, the jets with afterburners, it looks like a harmonica. It's all spread over the back part of the airplane, so it loses a significant amount of thrust. It is acoustically, again, because of the same tail, they don't hear it on the ground like they do the regular airplanes. Black, we fly at night. We hated flying in a full moon. This is a key factor. Aerodynamic instability in pitch, roll, and yaw. It has an F-16 fly-by-wire system. If you put that in a wind tunnel, it will end up upside down and backwards. It has 3 computers that continuously vote 100 times a second to put the flight controls where they need to be. If you fly up another airplane next to it, they call it the wobbly goblin, because all the flight controls were fluttering all the time with the computer changing it. You never felt it in the cockpit. It was a very, very solid, comfortable airplane to fly. It used infrared to acquire target and laser to determine the bomb release. Just like we didn't fly the airplane, we told the airplane where we wanted it to go. We didn't drop the bombs. We gave the airplane consent to drop the bomb. We'd fly in, fly with the infrared system, find the target, lock onto the target, or manually control it with a little button we had on the stick, and hit the release button. When the laser said it's time for the bomb to go, the bomb came off. Okay, off-the-shelf technology, completely off-the-shelf in 1970s technique. Many of you may remember how the military was getting hammered by their lack of control over their equipment. They were losing engines, losing all that stuff. There you have it, right there. Value of stealth technology proved itself. Generally, we could put 2 2,000-pound bombs in a 55-gallon drone. We are only limited by the width of the laser being on the ground. Mission planning was our issue. It just took too long to plan it. And at the end, we couldn't even plan all the missions, so we're flying 2 airplanes stacked above each other at 400 feet, hitting the same target. In dark, after 5 hours of flying, not talking to each other. There it is. Okay, let me go over some of the features.
Greg, just a little closer on the mic.
Okay. Some of the features. Pitot tubes, they're not round like every other airplane because because if it would have been round, it would have been too much of a radar. So they had to make them sort of diamond shaped or diagonal so that they wouldn't reflect. This is the infrared system. It's off an OV-10. So it was around since pre-Vietnam. Engine covers, we call them the ice cube makers because the airplane could not fly in icing conditions because the engine, which reduces the radar from reflecting off the rotors. So that's why that is there, but we couldn't fly in weather because of it. The cockpit, notice it's gold. They found out that a pilot's helmet has greater radar reflectivity than the rest of the airplane. So they put a gold shield on it to keep that from happening. The refueling door right here, these are air intakes for when we're on the ground. These are radar reflectors that we used in peacetime because if the identification system failed, the FAA couldn't find us in case we needed help. So we flew with radar detectors. When the first mission in Panama was flown, you still had the radar detectors on and the lights on. So there was no big threat there. I talked about the harmonica tail. The exhaust was spread over the tail. Those white are tiles off the space shuttle. I was told that after a mission you could go in and put your hand on them. I didn't try. But yeah, they're right off the space shuttle. And the way the tail's set up, it will protect you from infrared catching from up and above. It'll also help spread it out. Let me see what else. It had a C-130 environmental control system. That's been around a while. It had B-52 inertial navigation system. One was a B-52 built, early 50s. It took us over an hour to align the inertial navigation system. F-15 struts, OV-10 systems, ACES-2, the standard fighter ejection seat, F-16 fly-by-wire system, same thing. And one of the things that we need to really talk about is that the F-117 was not an evolutionary airplane. Most of you are familiar with aviation. They make a tweak here and change there. This was a totally revolutionary airplane. It's almost like when they came out with jets instead of props. It was that revolutionary. There's a bottom, and there's some things this is another OV-10 in our laser system. The bomb bay doors, that's a tail hook encased underneath. I don't think it was ever used in the history of the airplane because one of the things, if you needed a tail hook, you had to blow that panel off. And the airplane had to be totally redone almost. Lockheed, Burbank, California, where the airplane was conceived and built. Skunk Works. The Skunk Works are kind of a semi-clandestine aircraft builder. Kelly Johnson came up with the Dragon Lady, and they discovered in the SR-71 that it had stealthy properties because of its long, flat shape and the fact that the bottom was so flat that if they tried to reflect radar off of it, it would bounce away. That's what makes the F-117 so stealthy. There are no curved surfaces. It's all flat. So if you're shooting at it, it's like a mirror. If the mirror is not pointed directly at you, you can't see anything. The stealth was like that with the radar. It reflected everything off to the side. U-2 SR-71, Ben Rich, the F-117. Okay, DARPA, you're all familiar with DARPA, did not invite Lockheed to compete for its low observable fighter. With their success from the SR-71, Ben Rich convinced Kelly Johnson and all the people at Lockheed to build one at their expense and test it and fly it. And that's what they ended up doing. Dennis Oberhauser came up with the idea of the hopeless diamond. He is, well, here, he read a book by a 1960s researcher in Russia. He read it in Russian, called The Edge Waves and Physical Theory of Diffraction. Was how radar works. I couldn't understand it in English, but he did that, and he came up with all the ideas using a slide rule, and all that is how this was developed. That was the original design. Totally impractical. It wouldn't fly. They came up with this basic version, but still the tail is pointed inward instead of outward, and they found it to be, even in the wind tunnel, was unmanageable. Here's another story. These are the two competitions for the stealth fighter in the final stages. They tested the Northrop airplane, and then they went to test the Lockheed airplane, and the radar guy says, my radar's broken. I'm not getting anything. Let me go get a check that a bird landed on it. And he got a reflection from the bird and said, we've got something here. The first prototype, again, look at the tails are inside. This is half blue, very small compared to the regular F-117, but it proved concept. The very, very first airplane in design. They were all hand-built in Burbank. If you take a look at the F-16, F-15, F-22, F-35 programs, they took 12 to 15 years to develop and fly. That airplane from conception to its first flight was 34 months. Okay, they're all built in Burbank. How do you keep the public from seeing them? They took them apart, put them in a C-5 without the wings, put the wings in there, and they flew them to Area 51 early, and then Tonopah later on. Tonopah, I'll show you, is just west of Area 51. But they flew them all in and then put them back together out at Area 51 or Tonopah. Okay, this is not classified anymore, but Area 51's right out here. Here's Tonopah. Most all of us lived in Las Vegas. We'd go to Nellis, hop on essentially our own chartered airplanes, fly to Tonopah on Monday morning, stay there all week, fly home on Friday afternoon, then try to get back on our normal schedule. You talk about jet lag. But Tonopah is in the middle of nowhere. I'll show you a picture here shortly. So that's why they put it out there. That was the original Tonopah test range in the 1980s when they were very first testing the airplane. Field elevation, 5,500 feet. For those of you that are aviators, know that that's pretty high for takeoff and landing, particularly with a detuned airplane because it doesn't have afterburners and it has that harmonica tail. That was Tonopah in the late 80s. And Tonopah was built in two sections. This was called the industrial site, where all the airplanes were flying and all that kind of stuff. There was also a thing called the man camp, which was 7 miles up that way, where we had, essentially, I had a hotel with a permanent room for each member of the squadron had their own permanent rooms. We had hotels, we had dining facilities, we had all the standard services of an Air Force base, personnel and all that kind of stuff. But they were far enough away, 7 miles, that they couldn't see what was going on in the industrial area. You gave a talk about constant peg, right? Okay, constant peg is where the Air Force and I think Navy pilots flew MiGs against Air Force pilots to show how the MiGs fly. The constant peg airplanes were here, F-117's there, and there.
Yeah, real quick, for those that didn't catch that, the constant peg, we operated squadrons of Soviet-built MiGs for decades in the 80s, secretly out of this base. Now it's unclassified, there's books about it and everything else, but yeah, so they're flying the F-117s. The hangars next door had these MiG aircraft that we wouldn't acknowledge existed, flying out of the same base. And my last little thing is when I was flying in the 80s, we'd go up to Red Flag, And this was still listed as a little municipal airport on the map.
Yeah.
And I can remember flying over 20-some thousand feet, looking down and saying, municipal airport, my ass, as you look down at that. So it was like, got it, copy. Back to you, Greg.
And the stealth, you fly your first couple sorties in the daytime. Everyone's solo. We had good simulators, but every flight was solo. There weren't any trainers. You fly your first couple in the daylight when no satellites were going over. After that, all the flights were at night. Only initial training flights were in the daytime. There it is. That's what you see when they first open up the hangar doors. And you go, I hope this damn thing flies. Just a flying picture. You can see the antenna extended, so peacetime you can talk. Lights are on. That's a test bird from Edwards. And there we are on our way to Saudi Arabia. This is a picture taken at Langley Air Force Base. Flew airplanes, well, us that were flying hopped on a chartered airplane that flew to Langley. We had the test squadron and the training squadron fly our airplanes to Langley because we had to take off the next day for a 14-hour flight. I was in the airplane for 16 hours when we took off. I could not get out of the airplane physically.
Greg, I don't think you really mentioned it yet, but the plane was classified for the longest time. We didn't acknowledge its existence until after Panama, correct? Or before Panama?
It was 88, I believe.
Okay, so by the time the first Gulf War rolled around, we did acknowledge it. So this was in the public at this point. We didn't hide the stink bugs anymore. Sorry, that's what we call them. The F-117s. At this point, they were public knowledge when they were parked at Langley.
Half the Air Force called them cockroaches because we hid in the daytime and came out at night. Yeah, this one up here at the end, that's mine. We flew across the pond. We took off in a late afternoon, flew across over to just between the south of Spain, flew across the Med, went down the Nile over to Saudi Arabia. The actual flight time was just over 14 hours, and it took us, like I said, an hour to align the INS, so you're sitting in the airplane. And then you get to Khamis Mushat, which I'll show you, trying to find your way around Khamis Mushat was a nightmare, but it was a great place. And we flew in pairs and cells like that. And going over the Atlantic, I had a cell of 8. Going over the Atlantic, the weather was so bad, every one of us went what we call lost wingman, meaning you lose sight of the tanker, and you're tucked up, you're tucked right up under the wing, not like this. You're completely tucked up under the wing. And just, they have certain procedures where you go away, you change your altitude so that you don't hit each other. Every one of us at the same time because of the thunderstorm. Okay, here's Khamis Mushat, King Khalid Airport. This is Yemen. It's 40 miles from Yemen. So it was way down there. Over 1,000 miles to Baghdad. So our standard sortie was 5.5 hours long. Our longest sortie was 7.2 hours, that was mine. And the shortest sortie was 4.5 hours, that was also mine. But we'd go up, fly to the border, tankers would pick us up because Khamis was so high, I'll show you later, that we couldn't take off with a full fuel load with our bombs. So we'd have to take off, refuel, and keep refueling until we got to the border and get ready to do what we call our fence check and cross the border. And you just keep hitting the tanker over and over and over and over. The tankers didn't know when they just met us, took us up there, started doing an orbit, and we on and off as we needed, and we didn't tell them, we just left. Because we found out early in the war that if we left and then they went to where they picked us up, the Iraqis knew we were coming. So we just left and didn't tell them. And eventually, they had a certain departure time that was not related to ours, and they would go meet us for the exit refuelings. That's King Khalid Air Base. Now, after flying across the pond to get there, I was in the lead. We're talking to control. We still had our reflectors on. And he said, you got the airfield on your nose at 10 miles. I said, where? You couldn't see it. Perfectly camouflaged. It was a secret Saudi base that they had not even taken from the Dutch yet. It was brand new. The way I describe it is you give a country too much money and tell them to spend it all on an airfield. That was King Khalid. If you take a look at all the taxiways and everything else, there was no way you could shut that airfield down. There are no single choke points anywhere, or even dual choke points. 6,700 feet. The way Saudi Arabia is, I'm not sure I have, it's off by the Red Sea. The Red Sea's hot. The empty quarter is on the other side. What happens is the empty quarter gets hot, raises up, all the moisture comes from the Red Sea, rises up a 6,200 foot escarpment, basically a cliff, and turns into thunderstorms. Our entertainment was watching lightning, drinking fake beer at night, and looking for cobras. That was our entertainment. We got about usually 6 to 8 cobras a day, just on the taxiways and stuff. You can take a look how it's pretty well protected because they have all the taxiways. If they bomb the hangar, which you can't see it from the air, if they bomb the hangar, it won't spread to anything ever in between it. Spectacular, brand new facilities, underground water, underground gas, living quarters, the whole bit inside the hangar. Just a picture of the bomb coming off. We carry 2 different bombs. I will show you those in different, but that's how like the bomb door would come open for about 2 seconds, bomb would come up, close again. Heaven forbid he gets stuck open. I think you know who that guy is. Norm. The guy on the left is the very first Air Force guy to fly the airplane. He was the first test pilot, Air Force test pilot. He became the wing commander. There were 3 weekends in a row we had change of command type ceremonies. He had his, I had mine. Iraq invaded Kuwait. Basically that sequence. That was in 90. Okay, take a look at the 2 different types of bombs. This is a GBU-10, this is a GBU-27. The GBU-10 was a soft bomb. It was designed for industrial complexes and stuff above the ground. It had what they call bang-bang fins. It was an older model. The fins did this kind of motion, so the bomb would go up and down. Had a very wide field of view, as you can see. So it could be dropped from a much higher altitude than the GBU-27. The GBU-27 was a penetrator. In some command and control facilities that we bombed, they don't think the bomb blew up until it was over 6 stories underground. Sometimes you drop it and they'd have reconnaissance up there, and it would take 13 to 15 seconds for the smoke to come up. But again, it had to be dropped at low altitude. Relatively low altitude, well within the AAA range and the SAM range. Just a night picture of the tanker.
Real quick, AAA, anti-aircraft
Anti-aircraft.
artillery. This is the bullets and all that fly up. SAM, surface-to-air missiles, of course, could go a lot further and all that.
Yeah, the airplane isn't protected from bullets. If they put enough, they just happen to miss us. They just plain missed us. Okay, the tanker. Are you anybody here familiar with the light bars and stuff? Okay, what the light bars do is help you get on. It tells you if you're within the proper distance from the tanker and if you're up too high or too low. So you get on, different colors, and we refuel so often. You get on, you plug in, you go up to the green spot, and you'd never move. You'd just be there. Coming across the pond, my aerial refueling door broke. And it broke open, fortunately. But the airplane has a very fragile center of gravity because of its odd shape. And you had to keep it within a certain range. Well, I was afraid if I closed my door, it wouldn't come open. And I'd be end up in Spain or Italy or something. So I kept it open. I had to refuel 28 times across the pond. Okay, Baghdad, just a show of where the AAA, the artillery is, the SAM sites, all the radars. Iraq had 750 shooter airplanes. Of course, after the third or fourth day, F-15s were shooting them out of the sky, they buried them. The initial attack, they all say, what, it started at 2 a.m.? It didn't. It started at 1:40. The F-117s crossed the border to take out these early warning sites. Some helicopters went in also because they didn't want those early warning sites to see this whole horde of airplanes just beyond line of sight. So with those radar sites gone, everybody else came across at 2 o'clock. And all the 117s were already in around Baghdad because they started dropped the bombs at 2 a.m. Okay, this is a demo. I told you, we hadn't talked, you don't even talk on the ground. You leave the airplane, leave the hangar after your briefing, and that's the last time you say anything to anybody. You get in your airplane, you do everything on time. We all get in our airplanes, you join up, take off, find the tanker, head in, and all of these targets, you see the target lines, all of those targets were hit within 2 seconds of each other. If you weren't within 2 seconds, you didn't drop. If you were early, you set the guns all off before your buddies were there. And if you're late, you're gonna get hosed. So everything was done on time.
And real quick, you didn't really mention why you don't talk, because anytime one, they can listen in, and the other is anytime you emit anything on the electromagnetic spectrum, it can be detected.
Well,
So the whole idea was to not have any emissions at all.
partly, and also a radar or a radio antenna is a reflector. We sucked ours in. We didn't have it. We couldn't talk because everything had been closed up in the airplane. We were unable to physically hear or speak once we got airborne. Till after we came off target and after we got back to Saudi Arabia, we could talk to we'd tell AWACS, hey, we're out. And we'd talk to the tanker, hey, we're inbound. Make sure your lights are on. That kind of thing. On the way up to the target, if you wanted to pass something to your wingman, we'd go and hook up on the tanker, tell the boomer, hey, I'm gonna get my wingman on, tell him this, or tell him that. And that's the way we communicated. It was an intercom between the two airplanes when you hit the tanker. The first night, our job was to go to Baghdad and take out strategic targets. The F-117 was the only aircraft to go to Baghdad. None of the others. TLAMs, missiles went, no other airplane. We had no jamming intentionally directed for us, but we were the only ones that went there. We took out their main communication systems, their TV, their radio, and their main military communication system. But they had a third. It was fiber optic. And it happened to be underneath the Al Rashid Hotel, the headquarters for that thing. And that's where all the foreign newspaper folks were. We wanted to call them and say, hey, Peter, you probably don't want to be home tonight. But that's also the reason we couldn't bomb it. And we took out bridges, not because we needed to stop the transportation, because nothing was moving, but the fiber optic cables ran under the bridges. You take out the bridge, you take out their third communication system to Iraq, or to Kuwait. These are a couple of them that were there, all stayed in the same hotel. Everything you saw on CNN that first night was our crew. Okay, 5.5 hours. The worst weather they've had since they started recording it 40 years ago. Thunderstorms, and that airplane is no good whatsoever with an undercast, with it foggy because it's an infrared system. It just plain didn't work. Most heavily defended city in the world, that's not true. Moscow was a little bit more heavily defended, but twice that of Eastern Europe, 4 times as much as Hanoi. No aircraft losses or damage. This is, to me, a key factor. 2 weeks and 36 F-117s destroyed 60% of Iraq's critical strategic targets, and all those others took out the other 40%. Had a drag chute, we used it all the time we needed to. It took off fast because it had to get enough because of its shape, and it landed fast. Our standard landing speed was about 180 knots plus between 3 and 6 extra knots for fuel. And oh, this is a peacetime picture too, because at the end we thought we were pretty cool. We got black drag chutes to match the airplane. For those of you that haven't seen refueling, that's the boomer. Refueling, we had special tankers, specially trained. They same airplanes. We use regular jet fuel, but 2 different groups. One, the 135s, and the one that for the KC-10s were able to refuel us.
Yeah, and that's a KC-10. One, the guy's not laying on his belly
Yeah.
doing the air refueling, and the probe is a little bit different. It's not little wings. You got the little things on the side there.
That's what they look like now, most of them. They're still doing some testing with them a little bit, but most of them are taken apart. Mine is not. I talked to Pentagon not too long ago, and they said mine's still it hasn't been decommissioned yet. If you're interested, there is one in Kalamazoo at the Air Zoo. The volunteers there have rebuilt one. It looks really cool. They went to Home Depot and got stuff and made bombs, and instead of space shuttle tiles, they went to Home Depot and got some floor tiles. But you can't tell. It looks really good. Okay, the basic lessons learned. Stealth technology. There's never been, I told you, revolutionary. Every airplane made since then, to include cargo planes, are considering stealth as part of their building. Follow on. Huge boost to those programs. Realistic training. We used to go practice before the war, Desert Storm, flying along the border to see what they do. And originally, the command and control for the Air Force, Schwarzkopf and Horner, didn't believe we could do what we said we could do. So we told them, okay, we're going to come and blow up your headquarters tonight. Simulate blowing up your headquarters tonight. Okay. Horner called the next day and goes, hey, I thought you guys were going to come and do our headquarters. We're still here. He said, we'll send you the film. So we sent them all the film. Every film mission was filmed. We had a VCR type thing and showed them that every airplane had gone through an airtime stamp to show them right exactly when the airplanes came over their headquarters. Hardened target penetrators, all-weather bombs, those are things and guidance systems that we realized are needed. Remember, this is, let's see, 23, it's over 30 years ago. We knew that because when some of the stuff we had to hit, we couldn't, the GBU-10, the soft bomb, just would not penetrate like the hangars and some of their underground facilities. All-weather capability. We didn't have GPS. All we had was infrared. What we do is we get pictures of the target area and our route, and we'd sit down after our briefing and highlight them with like a Sharpie or a highlighter and look for it on the ground. Now we had the inertial navigation system to kind of get us in the directions, but we actually flew with photos in our hand. A stack usually 8 to 10. Timely response, because we could never hit a moving target. We had no idea where they were. We had to have it fixed, but we never find it. Mission planning systems are critical, absolutely critical in an airplane like that that's got to keep quiet and do everything else. Okay, now, questions?
What was the effective range? You said that those things burn a lot of gas, right? You guys use those a lot?
With a tanker, you can go as far as you want. So, like I said, we flew across the pond. This rough range, I'd say it's 1,200 miles, just without refueling.
What was the push that designed this program so quick, 36 months, you said, inception to the operations?
What was that now?
What was you said the design time was short window. What was the impetus to push that along?
Lockheed did it all on their own pretty much. They decided to do it and then join the competition. The Skunk Works doesn't work like your normal factory. They can do pretty much, they're very, very innovative, and they can do stuff and make it happen today on their own schedule, in their own dime.
Thank you.
Is that it?
You said the computer did most of the flying, but as you're coming in at 180 miles an hour, are you hand flying?
Yeah. I mean, we
So the
have.
question was about the fly-by-wire and everything else, just so everybody knows the question you're answering. Were you flying by hand or any type of an autopilot, I think was the question.
Yeah, we flew everything by hand, pretty much. Now, the autopilot could follow the route. It couldn't change altitude, but it could follow the route. But we wouldn't let it, because we found out early in the combat, the first couple nights, as a matter of fact, because if you're looking at the stealth, it's got a flat bottom, right? So it's like a mirror. But if you're doing a turn, now it's a barn door. And a couple times, you come out of a turn and missiles would come flying by you. Because it's stealthy, not just, it's got a radar absorbent material that protects you. Its shape protects you from long range targets. But the missiles have very, very short range fusing. And the way they work is they send out a pulse. If nothing comes back, they don't have it. If it comes back, they blow up. And that radar absorbent material absorb that wavelength on the radars. I had a couple on my third mission, I think. And the fact that we were invisible, when the clouds were on the ground, we just stayed up higher, you know, even if we're carrying the hard bombs, because you knew you could bomb. But I was coming by an airfield, and a ZSU-23-4, which is a 23 millimeter automatic gun, fires 4,000 rounds a minute, I think.
More than that.
Yeah, more, and it just, you could see the tracers. It tracked me. The next one tracked me. The next one tracked me. I was just out of range. But they had, because I wasn't at the right angle, I didn't come directly at them. We had to directly overfly every target to take advantage of the shape of the aircraft.
You showed us a picture of all the stealths lined up, and you were the first plane in the row. You all flew over with the tankers, and then you had 8 to 10 photos of where you're going.
Well, you didn't have photos of Camise. Once we went to combat, every night we had target photos.
Oh, yeah,
So it was just
yes.
for our target missions.
Okay, so once you were all about to take off to go find your targets, and you said that all those bombs went off within 2 seconds of each other.
We generally
Some
flew in
amount of time.
cells. We didn't always fly
Okay.
8 at a time or whatever.
But you were all using like photographs and some
Photographs and infrared.
infrared to hit those targets within 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who needs AI? I said, who needs AI?
Question in the back, go.
I've got a loud enough voice, so I don't think I need a microphone. And I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question sensitively. 14 hours seems to be a long time. Where do you find a rest area?
You carried it with you. I used to have one, and it's called a piddle pack. I don't know how many are familiar with it. It's a very heavy-duty plastic bag type thing with a funnel on it and a sponge inside. So if you had to go, you would attempt to use the piddle pack. Highly unsuccessful in most cases.
And actually, the later versions actually had a powder inside, which is like from diapers. So when you peed in the bag, it actually turned into a gel. And every fighter aircraft ever designed actually has little empty places on the side of the cockpit out there where you can put filled piddle packs. Number 2 is a whole other story. Don't want to go there. That's actually why they used to feed us what they called high protein, low residue meals.
We had a special
before long
diet.
flights that they they clogged you up on purpose.
Well, and the hardest part wasn't, we were wearing anti-exposure suits. It's like a dry suit because we were flying across the Atlantic and the water was cold. So you've got your anti-exposure suit on, you've got your G suit on, you've got your harness on, you've got the zipper.
Y'all ever want to know why a flight suit zips from the top and the bottom?
Yeah, but
Now you know.
But with all that gear on,
Too late.
that piddle pack is pretty awkward, let me tell you.
Yeah, we could keep. All right, you started down this path. I will say for a while they actually experimented with, they called them catheters, but it was like, let's say it was a condom that actually had a tube on the end that you would put on for the flight and route the tube out before you ever took off. So you were flying along and you had the little tube right there, so if you peed, it would actually come out the tube through all those many layers of things. That didn't last too long, but there you go. Way more information than you ever wanted to know.
I tell you what though, that is, when I speak to school groups in smaller, hey, what did you do in the military, that kind of thing, that's the number one question. Okay, anybody else?
So your airplane is pretty sensitive to weather. When you guys would fly this combat mission, would you go no matter what the weather was, and just go and see or come back? Do you cancel more than you
If
do?
the vast majority of sorties that we lost were weather. It was a very operationally good airplane, but we lost a lot of sorties to weather because of either thunderstorms or we'd get to the target area and it would just be covered with fog. So you'd go through and try to find, we had what they call dump targets, where there'd be something out in the desert, you knew a target was there, and you'd go and blow it up. Because you didn't want to come back with bombs. Because if anything happened, you didn't want that bomb blowing up underneath you. Anybody else?
Big round of applause, please. So thank you so much. That's a little insight into history. As we get to the new generation of low observables, and I know I've talked this before, and you heard me, I use the phrase low observables because stealth is not invisible, okay? Nowadays there are radars and everything, but if a radar could normally see 100 miles and now it can only see 20, think of it if you're going into a threat area, instead of having all these overlapping, now you have all these little measles. And the new airplanes have systems that can actually detect where they are, so now they can thread themselves in between the threats to get where we need to. So the evolution of the low observable into today's technology and everything's pretty amazing. But I mean, the F-117, off-the-shelf, neat stuff. It answered a need and a requirement at the time in a very efficient way. What a cool answer.
One of the ways we were effective, we had our own satellites in our own mission planning cells. We knew where the threats were and planned our target runs around them. If the threat moved, we couldn't tell, we didn't know, but we tried to minimize the threat. So if you're flying a mission and you're already optimized, we flew our missions exactly. Any deviation, you made your situation worse. So how many of you are pilots here? Anybody? Okay. Every flight was like an instrument check. Heading, on altitude, exactly. Turn here, do this, turn there. So every was instrument driven. Besides, we flew at night, couldn't see anything.
All right, any other questions or anything as we go? If you're not on our mailing list and you would like to be, please let me know. Joining the AFA is really easy, by the way, afa.org. And you can go to the membership tab there. That's how you join, become part of this. Remember, next month we're going to be talking STEM education for young kids. So we're going to jump into that part of what we do out at Starbase at Selfridge. So if you have any other questions, please let me know. We're looking for volunteers for the air show. There's a lot of events that are coming up in the near future. We have the parade on the 26th this month if you want to come out and hand out candy to kids or dog bones to the fur babies. come join us for that one, promoting the AFA and being an ambassador. But that being said, if you have any other questions, sidebars, come up, talk to Greg, talk to me, talk to any of our wonderful AFA team. But on that note, have a fantastic Phantom Friday, and if you don't know what that is, join me on Facebook and you can find out. Have a wonderful rest of your day.